Story 1. The Halloween Stroller. The autumn air hung heavy with the scent of fallen leaves and the faint sweetness of candy as 7-year-old Ethan clutched his pillowcase, its fabric already straining under the weight of Halloween loot. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the sky burned orange before surrendering to the inky black of night. Ethan's mother, usually the steadfast chaperone for his trick-or-treating adventures, had made an unusual decision this year. She dropped him off at his friend Sean's house, a ramshackle 2-story home on the edge of their suburban neighborhood, where the paint peeled like old skin and the air always carried the faint musk of cat. Sean, a lanky 9-year-old with a mischievous grin, and their mutual friend Johnny, a wiry kid with a knack for storytelling, were Ethan's companions for the night. The trio had met a year earlier while playing tag on the block, their friendship forged in the carefree chaos of childhood. But Sean's home was a world apart from Ethan's. His mother, a ghostly figure who seemed to drift in and out of town for work, was rarely seen. His sister, a 20-something with sharp eyes and a revolving door of boyfriends, acted as his reluctant caretaker. She barely acknowledged Ethan, her gaze cold and distant, as if he were an intruder in her domain. That Halloween, Ethan's mother had assumed Sean's mom would supervise their candy-collecting expedition. But as Ethan stepped into the dimly lit living room, the truth settled like a stone in his stomach. No adults were coming. Sean's sister lounged on the couch, her attention fixed on a man sprawled beside her, a cigarette dangling from his lips. She waved them off with a flick of her wrist, muttering something about staying out of trouble. Johnny, ever the bold one, shrugged it off, his eyes glinting with the thrill of freedom. "We don't need him," he said, hefting his own pillowcase. "We're gonna own this night." Ethan, younger and more cautious, felt a flicker of unease. His mother would have grounded him for a month if she knew he was heading out unsupervised. But the allure of adventure, coupled with the older boy's confidence, silenced his doubts. They set off into the neighborhood, their costumes, a pirate for Ethan, a vampire for Sean, and a zombie for Johnny, flapping in the chilly breeze. The streets buzzed with the laughter of other trick-or-treaters, their flashlights cutting through the dusk like fireflies. For hours they roamed, knocking on doors and chanting "trick-or-treat" with practiced enthusiasm. Neighbors smiled, tossing handfuls of candy into their sacks, though more than a few raised eyebrows at the absence of an adult. "Where's your mom?" one woman asked, her voice tinged with concern. Johnny, quick on his feet, spun a lie with ease. "She's just up the street with my sister." The excuse worked like a charm, and they pressed on, their pillowcases growing heavier with each block. By 7:30 p.m., the trio took a break, retreating to Sean's house to refuel. The living room was a haze of cigarette smoke and flickering TV light, where Halloween specials played on Nickelodeon. Sean, with the casual independence of a kid left to his own devices, tossed frozen pizzas into the oven, the smell of pepperoni mingling with the ever-present cat odor. Ethan, munching on a slice and sneaking a Snickers from his stash, couldn't help but envy Sean's apparent freedom. No bedtime, no rules, just a house where he could do whatever he wanted. But beneath the envy, a quiet gratitude stirred. Ethan's parents, strict as they were always there, their presence a steady anchor in his world. Johnny's mom picked him up soon after, leaving Ethan and Sean to continue their quest. The night had grown darker, the streets quieter, with only a few stragglers still out. The boys ventured further from Sean's house, drawn to untouched blocks where the candy halls might be richer. The neighborhood felt different now, the festive energy replaced by an eerie stillness. Porch lights flickered off one by one, and the air seemed to hum with something unspoken. As they approached a new street, Ethan noticed a figure in the distance, a man pushing a stroller, moving slowly, almost deliberately, in their direction. The stroller's wheels creaked faintly, and the man's silhouette was framed by the faint glow of a street lamp. Ethan assumed he was a father, perhaps taking a young child out for a late trick-or-treat stroll. But something about the man's pace, the way he seemed to linger just behind them, sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. The boys continued their rounds, knocking on doors that increasingly went unanswered. The man with the stroller drew closer, his presence impossible to ignore. Ethan caught snippets of sound, soft shushing, as if soothing a restless baby, followed by a low melodic hum that felt out of place in the quiet night. Finally, the man caught up to them, his voice warm but oddly deliberate. "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" he asked, his face half hidden in the shadows. "Good," Ethan and Sean replied in unison, their voices small against the weight of the moment. "It's getting late," the man said, his tone almost too friendly. "I'm heading back to my house. Got a whole pile of candy left, bags of it. Didn't get many trick-or-treaters this year. You boys want it?" Ethan's heart leaped at the prospect, visions of chocolate bars and gummy worms dancing in his mind. Sean's eyes lit up, and he shot Ethan a look that screamed jackpot. "What kind of candy?" Sean asked, his voice eager. "All sorts," the man said, gesturing to a plastic bag dangling from the stroller's handle, brimming with colorful wrappers. "I was out with my daughter, but she's asleep now." He patted the stroller, its canopy fully lowered, obscuring any view of the child inside. "Don't want to wake her, but my house is just up the street. Come on, I'll hook you up." The boys exchanged a glance, their excitement tempered by a flicker of caution. Ethan's mother had drilled stranger danger into him since he could walk, but the promise of candy, and Sean's apparent trust, overrode his instincts. They followed the man, the stroller's wheels crunching against the pavement. The neighborhood grew quieter still, the houses spaced further apart, their windows dark and uninviting. The man chatted as they walked, asking where they lived, what school they went to, his questions innocuous but persistent. Ethan let Sean take the lead, his older friend's confidence a shaky shield against the growing knot in his gut. Every so often, the man leaned into the stroller, cooing in a high-pitched voice. "Shh, sweetie, we're almost home." He turned back to the boys with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ethan noticed the bag of candy swaying on the stroller, but something else caught his attention. The stroller seemed too still, too silent. No baby fussed or stirred, no tiny hand reached out from beneath the canopy. They reached a modest house at the end of the street, its porch light casting a sickly yellow glow. The man unlocked the door, wheeling the stroller inside before turning to the boys. "Come on in," he said, holding the door open. Sean stepped forward and Ethan, reluctant but unwilling to be left alone, followed. The living room was sparsely furnished, the air thick with the scent of stale cigarette smoke and something metallic. Ethan's eyes darted to the stroller, now parked in the center of the room, its canopy still lowered. "Can we leave the door open?" Ethan blurted, his voice trembling. The man paused, his smile tightening. "Yeah, sure," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'll grab the candy. Be right back." He disappeared down a hallway, leaving the boys alone with the stroller. Ethan's unease grew unbearable. He nudged Sean, whispering, "Why's the candy so far away? This feels weird." Sean didn't answer. Instead, he crept toward the stroller, his curiosity outweighing his caution. With a trembling hand, he lifted the canopy and froze. His face drained of color, his eyes wide with something Ethan had never seen in him before. Fear. "Let's go," Sean hissed, grabbing Ethan's arm. "Now!" They bolted for the door, their heavy pillowcases slowing them down. Ethan's heart pounded as they stumbled into the night, the cold air biting at their lungs. Behind them, the house loomed like a predator, its open door a gaping maw. They didn't stop running until they reached the next block, where a woman's voice cut through the darkness. "Hey, you kids okay?" She was a neighbor, her face etched with concern as she jogged toward them. "Do you know that man?" Sean, panting, spilled everything. He said he had candy, but the stroller, it wasn't a baby, it was just a doll. Ethan's blood ran cold, goosebumps prickling his skin. The woman's expression darkened. "That man doesn't have a kid," she said, her voice low. "I saw you walking with him. Come with me." She drove them home, her car a sanctuary in the chaos of the night. At Ethan's house, she explained everything to his mother, whose face crumpled with a mix of fury and terror. Ethan was sent to his room while his parents called the police, their hushed voices carrying fragments of words like predator and lured. The police came and went, but Ethan's parents shielded him from the details, determined to protect his innocence. They forbade him from returning to Sean's house. And though he saw Sean at school, Their friendship withered under the weight of that night. Years later, Ethan would piece together fragments of the truth from overheard conversations and news reports. The man had been a drifter, known to the police but never convicted, his stroller a prop in a twisted game. The doll, dressed in a onesie, had been meticulously arranged to mimic a sleeping child. Ethan never learned if the man was caught, but the memory of that Halloween, of the stroller's eerie silence and the man's too friendly smile, haunted him, a shadow that lingered long after the candy was gone. Story 2. The Clown at the Window. Halloween 2016 was a quiet affair in the sleepy cul-de-sac where Sophie lived. The street, tucked away from the main thoroughfares of their small town, rarely saw the flood of trick-or-treaters that swarmed busier neighborhoods. But Sophie's mother, ever the optimist, had stocked up on candy as if they were hosting a festival. Bags of Snickers, Reese's, and Skittles spilled across the kitchen counter, a colorful testament to her overzealous holiday spirit. Sophie, a 20-year-old college sophomore, had been roped into handing out the sweets, a task she accepted with a mix of resignation and amusement. She was trying to lose weight, and the temptation of leftover candy was a battle she'd rather not fight. The house was a cozy two-story with a wraparound porch, its windows glowing warmly against the October chill. Sophie spent the morning at the gym, her muscles aching from a grueling workout, before settling into her room to tackle a backlog of assignments. By 4 p.m., the first trick-or-treaters arrived, their high-pitched giggles and costume-clad enthusiasm pulling her from her textbooks. Her dog, Vito, a scrappy rat terrier with a bark bigger than his bite, went wild each time the doorbell rang, his yaps echoing through the house. The evening unfolded predictably. A handful of kids, maybe 10 or 15, braved the cul-de-sac's dead end, drawn by the reputation of Sophie's generous candy handouts. She smiled at their costumes, from pint-sized witches to a particularly adorable dinosaur, tossing fistfuls of candy into their buckets. Between visitors, she chipped away at her homework, the TV droning with reruns of Halloween specials. By 8 p.m., the stream of trick-or-treaters had dwindled to nothing. It was a Monday, after all, and most families had school or work looming the next day. Satisfied with her progress, Sophie heated up a bowl of her mom's beef stew and retreated to her room to binge Game of Thrones. The second-floor bedroom was her sanctuary, its walls plastered with band posters and fairy lights. She sank into her bed, the show's epic score filling the room, and let herself get lost in the drama of Westeros. 2 episodes in, the doorbell's sharp chime shattered her immersion. Vito erupted into a frenzy, his barks piercing the quiet. Sophie glanced at the clock. 9:30 p.m. Far too late for trick-or-treaters. Muttering under her breath, she paused the show and padded downstairs, expecting a tardy kid, or perhaps a parent squeezing in one last round. She flipped on the porch light and opened the front door, only to freeze. On the other side of the glass storm door stood a figure that sent her heart into her throat. A towering man in a clown costume, his face obscured by a grotesque mask. The mask was a nightmare made flesh, bulbous nose, smeared red lips, and hollow black eyes that seemed to swallow the light. He was alone, no child or companion in sight, and he held a brown sack that looked pathetically empty. Sophie's instincts screamed at her to slam the door, but she forced a polite smile, her voice muffled through the glass. "Sorry, we're out of candy," she lied, shutting the door with more force than intended. She locked it, her hands trembling, and cursed herself for opening it at all. The man's frame had been massive, his shoulders broad enough to fill the doorway. This wasn't a teenager pulling a prank or a dad playing dress-up. This was something else. She lingered by the door, straining to hear footsteps retreating. Silence. Then the doorbell rang again, shrill and insistent. Vito's barks escalated, his small body quivering with agitation. Sophie's pulse raced. She scooped up the dog, his warmth a small comfort, and turned off the downstairs lights, hoping to signal that the house was empty. She carried Vito to her room, shutting the door to muffle his noise, and stood at the top of the stairs listening. A loud snap echoed from the front door, followed by the unmistakable creak of the storm door being forced open. Sophie's breath caught. The latch must have broken under the man's strength. Knocks followed, heavy and deliberate, then a faint rattling as if he were testing the locked front door. Her mind raced. She grabbed her phone and texted her family group chat, her fingers fumbling. "Some guy in a clown costume is at the door. He won't leave. Help!" No one responded. Her parents were out, likely at a friend's Halloween party, and her brother was probably off with his latest fling. Sophie tried to convince herself it was a prank. 2016 had been the year of creepy clown sightings after all, a viral trend that had everyone on edge. She called her brother, who answered with an exasperated tone. "It's just a Halloween prank," he said, clearly distracted. "Ignore it." He hung up before she could argue. She returned to her room, locking the door and resuming her show, though her eyes kept darting to the window. The blinds were closed, but the darkness beyond felt alive, watching. The doorbell rang again, and Sophie's nerves frayed further. She shushed Vito, her voice sharp, and tried to focus on the TV, willing the clown to give up and leave. Minutes passed, the house silent except for the hum of the show. Exhausted, Sophie turned off the TV, plunging the room into darkness, and let herself drift toward sleep. She hadn't been asleep long, barely enough time to dream, when Vito's low growl pulled her back to consciousness. The dog was rigid, his eyes fixed on the window. Sophie's heart thudded as she listened. A faint thumping came from outside, rhythmic and deliberate, accompanied by a soft scraping, like fingers brushing against glass. Her bedroom was on the second floor. No one could be out there. It had to be a branch, a raccoon, something harmless. She forced herself out of bed, her legs unsteady, and approached the window. With a trembling hand, she pushed the blind aside and screamed. The clown's mask filled the glass, its painted grin leering at her. He tilted his head, the motion slow and predatory, as if savoring her terror. Sophie stumbled back, her scream echoing in the small room. She grabbed her phone and bolted to her parents' bedroom, locking the door behind her. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, her voice breaking as she explained the situation to the operator. "He's outside my window, on the second floor. Please send someone." The operator's calm reassurances did little to ease her panic, but she clung to the promise that police were on their way. 10 agonizing minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. Sophie stayed locked in the bedroom, clutching Vito, until she heard the police knocking. The officers searched the property, their flashlights slicing through the night. They found the storm door's latch broken, just as Sophie had feared, and something worse. Her father's ladder, usually stored in the backyard shed, was propped against the house, its top rung aligned with her bedroom window. The clown had planned this, had gone to the trouble of finding the ladder to reach her. The police took her statement, their faces grim, and promised to patrol the area. Sophie, too shaken to stay home alone, spent the night at her friend Adam's house. The image of the clown's mask burned into her mind. The police never caught the man. The ladder was dusted for prints, but nothing came of it. Sophie's parents installed a security system, and she never handed out candy again. The clown became a specter in her nightmares, a reminder of how close she'd come to something unspeakable. Whether it was a prank pushed too far or a predator exploiting Halloween's chaos, Sophie would never know. But every October, when the air turned crisp and the nights grew long, she locked her windows and kept the blinds shut, haunted by the memory of those hollow black eyes. Story 3. The Vacant House Party. The Saturday before Halloween was electric with possibility, the kind of night where the air crackled with anticipation and every plan felt like the start of an adventure. For Mia and her friends, Kate, Shauna, and Tracy, the weekend was a blank canvas, and they were determined to paint it with unforgettable memories. Halloween fell on a Tuesday that year, making Saturday the unofficial party night, but their plans had hit a snag. Every club event and bar crawl was sold out, and the prospect of a quiet night in was unthinkable. They were college juniors, armed with clever costumes, Mia as a flapper, Kate as a witch, Shauna as a pirate, and Tracy as a vampire, and a burning desire to make the night count. Kate, ever the bold one, took matters into her own hands. She posted on her Instagram and Snapchat stories a playful plea for party invites. 4 girls in killer costumes looking for a Halloween bash. "Hit us up!" Mia cringed at the shamelessness of it, but she couldn't deny the effectiveness. Within an hour, Kate's phone buzzed with a message from Jake, a mutual friend from high school who ran in the same social circles. He'd sent details for a house party in a neighboring town, just a 15-minute drive away. The screenshot Kate shared in their group chat included an address, a 10 p.m. start time, and a few rules. No backyard access, bring your own booze, and a curious requirement that every guy bring at least 1 girl. "It's legit," Kate assured them, her eyes gleaming. "Jake says a ton of people we know are going. It's gonna be huge." Mia wasn't entirely convinced. The rules felt oddly specific, and the idea of crashing a stranger's party made her uneasy. But Jake was a known quantity, and the promise of a real house party, complete with beer pong, thumping music, and a sea of costumes, won her over. They gathered at Shauna's house, a sprawling suburban home with parents conveniently out of town, to pregame. The living room became their staging ground, littered with makeup palettes, empty White Claw cans, and a playlist of Halloween-themed pop hits. Mia sipped a vodka soda, her flapper dress shimmering under the fairy lights, while Kate adjusted her witch hat and Shauna practiced her pirate swagger. By 10:30, they were piling into an Uber, their laughter drowning out the driver's polite attempts at small talk. The house was in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, its streets lined with manicured lawns and stately homes. As they pulled up, Mia's jaw dropped. The house was massive, a modern monstrosity with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a sprawling front yard packed with cars. The faint thump of bass pulsed from within, growing louder as they approached the front door. Mia pushed the door open, and they stepped into a dimly lit foyer that opened into a cavernous living room. Orange string lights cast an eerie glow, their warm hue clashing with the cold emptiness of the space. The house was packed, bodies swaying to the music, but something felt off. There was no furniture, no couches, no tables, just a vast expanse filled with people, beer pong tables, and coolers. The kitchen, visible through an archway, was equally barren, its counters lined with red Solo cups and bottles. A man approached them, his presence jarring in the sea of college-age faces. He was in his 50s with thinning hair and a too-wide smile, dressed in a generic black shirt that screamed, "I'm not here to party." "Welcome, ladies," he said, his voice booming over the music. "I'm John, Luke's dad. You must be Kate's crew." Mia exchanged a glance with Shauna. Luke? Who was Luke? Kate, unfazed, introduced them, and John shook their hands with an enthusiasm that felt performative. "Luke's around here somewhere," he said, waving vaguely at the crowd. "He's throwing this shindig. You girls want to stash your drinks?" He led them to the kitchen, where 3 large coolers sat against the wall, already brimming with cans and bottles. Mia hesitated but added her White Claws to the mix, noting the way John's eyes lingered on them. He was too involved, too eager for a parent hosting a college party. Most dads would be upstairs, grumbling about the noise, not playing bartender. The party hummed along, the crowd a mix of familiar faces and strangers. Mia and her friends gravitated to a beer pong table, where they challenged a group of guys in superhero costumes. The game was a welcome distraction, the banter and laughter easing Mia's unease. Kate texted Jake to confirm he was on his way, and Mia relaxed, sipping her drink and cheering as Shauna sank a shot. Then John reappeared, his voice cutting through the noise. "Kate! Mia! Shots!" He stood at the kitchen counter, pouring tequila into a row of cups. Shauna and Tracy exchanged a look, their exclusion obvious. Mia, ever the peacemaker, called out, "Can we all get one?" John laughed a little too loudly. "Of course, come on over, ladies." They crowded around the counter, downing the tequila in unison. Mia gagged at the burn, the lack of lime making it worse. The alcohol hit her hard, her head swimming as the room tilted slightly. John was everywhere, it seemed, weaving through the crowd, offering drinks and compliments. His attention focused almost exclusively on the women. Mia caught him staring at her, his smile unsettling, and she turned away, focusing on the beer pong game. Mid-game, John returned with red Solo cups, handing one to each of them. "Vodka soda for Mia," he said, his tone almost intimate. "Made it just for you." Mia thanked him, uneasy, and sipped slowly, the drink stronger than she expected. She plugged her phone into a nearby outlet to charge, only to find it dead, the socket useless. Frustrated, she tucked the phone into her pocket, determined to conserve its battery. Jake and his friends arrived, their familiar faces a relief. Mia chatted with Jeff, one of Jake's buddies. The conversation light and flirty, but the night began to blur, the edges of her vision softening. One moment, she was laughing at Jeff's terrible dance moves. The next, darkness swallowed her. She woke to the jolt of a car door slamming, her head pounding and her mouth dry. She was in the backseat of Jeff's car, parked outside her house with Kate shaking her awake. "Mia, come on, we're home." Her friends' faces were tight with worry, their voices hushed. Jeff helped her to the front door, his arm steadying her as she stumbled. Her parents were asleep, the house silent, and Mia collapsed onto her bed, the world spinning. Her phone buzzed, dragging her back to consciousness. A string of texts from an unknown number glowed on the screen. The first was from her, sent hours earlier. "Mia." The response chilled her. "John, you look so cute." Later texts, sent after she'd blacked out, were worse. "Where did my favorite girls go?" And then, in the early hours of the morning, "I'm coming to your house. You left something here. I'm here. Can you come to the door?" Mia's stomach churned. She'd given him her number? When? The memory was a blank, a void where hours of her life should have been. She sent screenshots to her friends, who filled in the gaps. John had been all over her, his attention predatory as she grew increasingly incoherent. Kate and Shauna had noticed her deteriorating, pulling her away just as police cars arrived, likely responding to a noise complaint. As they left, Jeff had pointed out the house's emptiness. No furniture, no signs of life, just a hollow shell filled with partygoers. The next morning, Mia and her friends went to the police station, their nerves frayed. The officer at the desk raised an eyebrow. "This about the party in the vacant house?" he asked. Mia's heart sank as he explained. The house had been empty for months, its owners long gone. The party had been a setup, orchestrated by someone, likely John, using a fake identity and a VoIP number that was nearly untraceable. The detective took their statements, his expression grim as he jotted down the details. Shauna's theory that John had slipped something into Mia's drink hung heavy in the air. The woozy, disconnected feeling Mia had experienced wasn't just alcohol. It was something darker, something deliberate. The police promised to investigate, but weeks passed with no updates. The number was a dead end, and John, whoever he was, had vanished. Mia changed her number and avoided parties for months, the memory of John's smile and the empty house a constant weight. Her friends rallied around her, but the fear lingered. A predator had targeted her, had come to her home in the dead of night, and was still out there. Halloween, once a night of carefree fun, became a reminder of how close she'd come to something unimaginable, in a house that wasn't a home at all.